Many people are asking, why are leaders not responding to the scandal at Daystar? Why are leaders not speaking up about the alleged essay of Little Lamb? Why aren't they saying anything? And in all my years of doing this work, of speaking about abuse in the church, whether it's SA or domestic abuse, mental health in Christian spaces, how we manage those really challenging situations. What do we do when an allegation of SA is made? When in all my years of doing this, and I started in 2014, 2015 officially, and I've never known, very rarely anyway, our leaders standing up and speaking out. And so when seeing this Daystar story unfold and seeing, lay people questioning, asking questions, really wanting investigations to be made, wanting the perpetrators to be brought to justice, wanting a child to be taken into consideration and to see for people to consider the impact of SA on a child. While lay people are asking those questions and calling for those asking those kind of questions that are difficult, leaders are being quiet. Leaders are quiet. They are silent. They are not saying anything. And people are asking, where are these leaders? Why aren't they saying anything? Why are the people that still have their programs and Daystar not absolutely appalled by what is going on? Maybe they are silently outraged, and maybe they are silently, having conversations behind the scenes. But leaders, it would really be it will restore trust and faith in leadership, in church leadership, if we see that you're standing up and you're saying, this is absolutely outrageous, this is wrong, that there is an allegation of essay of a child, we want this investigated. Tell us what you are doing. Tell us how you are going to make sure this person, the alleged perpetrator, is going to be brought to justice. Tell us what you're doing to look after the child. Tell us what you're doing to protect the family. Tell us the safeguarding things that you have put in place to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Tell us what you're doing, because I can tell you this from experience: when an allegation of essay is made, chances are there are more people who will have similar stories. One of the questions that we have to ask when an allegation of essay is made, is there anybody else? You know, um, how do we, and also something else that needs to be considered is, how do we safeguard the rest of the vulnerable children and young people? How do we do that? So when we ignore it, though, when we ignore allegations of SA, we're exposing more people to harm. So it's really crucial that those questions are asked. Anyone else? How do we safeguard? What are the safeguarding procedures that we have in place that is going to protect other people? But what I see often happen in Christian spaces, and I see this happening here as well, as according to the stories that Jonathan and Susie told around those allegations, what we see is that the child was immediately not believed, and the alleged perpetrator was protected. And this is not unusual in Christian spaces. This happened a lot in Christian spaces where victims are not believed, perpetrators are protected. Sometimes they get promoted. Sometimes perpetrators in Christian settings get promoted. They become elders and leaders in church. They get to do, they still have access to children and young people. They still have the same amount of access that they want. And here's something that sometimes Christians tell themselves that they can do, that we can safeguard other people against them. You cannot. If somebody is going to hurt, they're going to hurt. You can't safeguard children and young people from somebody who you know to be a perpetrator. So those are some things that sometimes happen in Christian spaces, and we see them repeating. And it doesn't matter which country, it doesn't matter which church. It seemed like churches, Christian spaces, have the same kind of MO when it comes on to listening to victims and acting quickly on their behalf. and listening to victims, acting quickly, and ensure that we safeguard children and young people. Now, we saw that happen last year in the UK with the Church of England, where John Smythe from the Church of England went on to harm over 100 young men, and we see it happening in also in we saw it in the Seventh Adventist Church when Donald Kelly went on in several different countries to harm children and young people. And those are not one-off cases. There are many, many cases like that, though they have not reached the news, and nobody's talking about them on YouTube. Nobody's doing videos about them. And so what we're seeing here is the same kind of pattern. It's a similar pattern that has happened in Christian spaces. Now we see what happened in Gateway Church when Robert Morris and the alleged victim that came forward years after that took place. Well, I think Gateway did something that was so significant that I think it's worth mentioning, that the Gateway Church, they immediately suspend, and they immediately investigated and they fired elders that in that organization that knew about this and didn't do anything. So they were saying, and I think it's a wonderful example, whatever else they might not get right, I think when that eventually was dealt with, I think that was right, because I've not ever seen this happen before, where a church would stand up and said, we have fired the leaders who knew about this and didn't do anything. We have a zero tolerance policy when it comes to SA, and we are not going to ignore allegations anymore. We want to encourage people to come forward, and when you come forward, we're going to believe you and we're going to act swiftly. That is really encouraging when a church is saying, we're going to act swiftly on behalf of victims when they disclose, right? And so they fired the leaders who knew and did nothing. They're saying the message that is being sent is, this is not okay. I wish there were more Christian organizations willing to send that message. This is not okay. I wish there were more leaders that would stand up and say, not on my watch. I wish the leaders that other people are calling to do something, say something, will say, this is not happening on my watch. Where are all the prophets that are all over the place? So many prophets that are prophesying on YouTube, and why are they not saying anything about this alleged SA and how churches can be safer? Why are they not prophesying about the destruction that are happening in people's personal lives when they have to deal with SA? The level of destruction that happen in someone's personal life when they have to heal from SA is colossal. Where are the people that are not talking about it? And I submit that oftentimes leaders will not address really difficult subjects like this because they've also ignored. They've also not listened to victims. They've also don't have good safeguarding procedures in their churches that will help keep the church safe, that will help keep children and young people and vulnerable people safe. And so because they don't have it, they think we dare not speak on this issue. We cannot speak on this issue because if we speak on this issue, it's going to be exposing for us. But I want to advise you, if you're listening on your church and your leadership, or you're in the congregation, encourage your leaders to put safeguarding procedures in place before it happens to them. Because what is, as much as I work with this and I work with victims and I help so many people to cope and to heal, as much as I train in churches and I train leaders, this weekend I'm training a whole board of a church around recognizing the signs of abuse and what to do. And as much as I do that, and I love the work that God has called me to do, we are here doing this work because it's needed, because this is one church, one Christian organization, and then another church and another Christian organization. And so, the people who are saying, this is gossip, we don't have all the information, maybe we don't have all the information, but I tell you what is very clear for us, it's a pattern. This pattern is not a new pattern. We've seen this before. And unfortunately, if the leaders that are quiet, the people that are not saying anything, the people who are saying this is gossip, and if nothing changes in your church, unfortunately, we're going to see it again. because perpetrators are everywhere. And while we want to love everybody into the kingdom, we also have to know who people are and how to love them and how to safeguard people so that we are not loving them and exposing other people to harm due to their behavior. So, as much as we love and we ought to love and we ought to love and we ought to forgive, we have to do that with wisdom. God calls us to be people of wisdom. And he says in James 1, verse 5, if we lack wisdom, we can ask of God and he will give it to us liberally. He will give us wisdom in this situation as well. And that's why he raised up ministries and leaders who will call people like the Roy's report that will investigate. We wish that 2025 is a different year for Christian spaces, where we are going to have a zero tolerance policy about SA. At the moment, we are not sure because leaders are quiet. And the ones who talk, they're saying, mind your business, stop gossiping, let God deal with it. God deals with it through us. We are his hands and feet. We are his hands and feet that he will send to help to deal with really challenging subjects like this. If you are listening and your story was not heard, the perpetrator went on to harm other people, I want you to know that the people who ignored you, they were not representing Christ when they do that. That his heart of compassion is the same as it ever was, and that he still came to heal the broken heart and bind up their wounds. And if you have wounds, if you have scars because of SA that is unhealed, I want you to know that Jesus knows, he cares, he understands, and he wants you to have healing. He wants you to find peace. He wants you to be able to function in your relationships. He wants you to free you from the low self-esteem and the anger and the fear and the sadness. He wants to heal you completely. If you are in a church, be prepared. Be one of those that will stand up and say, I am going to have a zero tolerance policy. If anybody this close to me, this is the procedure that I'm going to follow. I'm going to phone the police. I'm going to report this. I'm going to be available for full investigation. But another thing that occurred to me is church is made up of families. Our community is made up of families. And a lot of times in families, when disclosures of SA happens, there's cover up in families too. And if families are covering up, then families lead the church. And so the work really starts in our families. We're in our families. When a disclosure is made, we take that disclosure seriously in our families, in our homes, so that we are representing Christ in our homes, so that we take that representation in the church and in the society. And as Christians, we can be the light of the world that we ought to be. Thank you for watching this video. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel and share this video with those who you think will benefit.